basically, oh, thank you, Joe. We're going to record this for anybody who feels like they want to maybe watch it at a different time where it's more conducive to their, whatever. So this is, it's okay. have to hit got it. We're not going to be fancy. I'm going to tell you, Molly and I just want to talk to you. And so, environmental education, the Minnesota's new science standards, part two, diving deeper. And that's just kind of what we're going to do. I am Sue Moan, and I'm a former classroom teacher and naturalist. So, I kind of cross both of those divides here. And now I'm just working with Teach Outdoors Minnesota from home. Molly?
Yes, hi, I'm Molly. I work in Fergus Falls at the Prairie Wetlands Learning Center. It's part of the Fergus Falls Wetland Management District and is operated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that is who I work for. And I met Sue and I met each other through Teach Outdoors Minnesota. We actually haven't met in person yet.
Not yet, but I'm gonna travel up and see Fergus because her
Yay.
classroom sounds outstanding, everyone. I mean, outstanding. She has so many kids coming to Prairie Wetlands on a daily basis. We need to replicate this. So,
Oh,
um,
thanks, Sue.
oh, yeah. So we know that Minnesota has new science standards out there, and it's a lot to digest. And so we're going to take another step down deeper from where John and Pete took us the first week, a couple weeks ago. Now, this slide, and we are going to, have that link to this slide. You can access this because the framework for K-12 science education is really the baseline, that whole piece that everything else was built upon. And it's amazing research and it's worth its own read and it's free. It's a free download. And then you have the next generation science standards. Yes, that is Minnesota, played a huge part in developing those, and they have their own national website that you're going to be able to get to. But we changed them ever so slightly to include not only the cultural component, but to be uh, cognizant of, like, if third grade was always teaching a certain subject, we tried to keep that subject billed for third grade if it was only a switch of one or two grade levels. Is that about right, John? Yeah. So I really like where Minnesota took us with all of these standards. And one of the greatest things that I think Minnesota did was that they chose, for the biggest part of these standards is doing the science. John and Pete talked about one of the biggest conceptual shifts based on the framework was figuring out, just not learning about. And that is truly scientific investigation. And there are 8 science and engineering practices that are over on that side, the asking questions, developing models, planning and carrying out investigations, and so forth. These are now just the real crux of what are the Minnesota standards. And so that, I think, is super exciting. You'll also hear about this concept of three-dimensional learning, that, it weaves between the science and engineering practice, the doing, with the disciplinary core ideas, which are the facts, and these cross-cutting concepts. And I love these because that means that now our educators, if they're in the field of music or phy-ed, art, they can look at patterns, cause and effect, energy and matter, and apply it to these new scientific standards. And kids can see how science really isn't just its own little topic over here that maybe we hit for 30 minutes once in a while. It is something that should be a daily practice. And so, what I like to look at are this shift. Now, in the past, the 2009 standards had the main strands of being life science, earth science, physical science, and then this, you know, nature of science and engineering. And once in a while, we get to that nature and science and of engineering, but not on a um, daily practice. So now Minnesota said, nope, nope, nope. We're going to take those 8 science and engineering practices and put them in these 4 big strands: exploring phenomena, looking at data, developing the explanation, and then communicate those ideas. And when you look at that, look at how rich that is. Exploring phenomena, that is what we do so well as non-formal educators in natural history. I mean, this is what we love to spend our time doing. Just go out and explore a phenomena. We are well poised to help teachers understand these standards. Looking at data, this is where the math coincides with science. So when people are like, I just don't have enough time in my day. Well, look it, we can do a math lesson outside and incorporate the phenomena. And now you've done check, check, you've done science and math at the same time. Same thing with developing these explanation and communicating ideas. Look at how many things relate to language arts: reading, writing, discussing, even arguing a point. This is really, really important and lots of fun in my book. I like to look at these new science strands as being an inquiry process. And this graphic is part of Wonder of Science, and I'll include the link and such too. I know that John and Pete made reference to the Wonder of Science website last week. Um, it is an amazing site. But what they took look at is like when you look at an inquiry wheel, which we all do inquiry all the time. The idea is what's the phenomena in the middle? And it could be as big as like migration, what's going on? We're having a change of seasons, or a lot of us, and my near and dear to my naturalist heart was having the turtle in the middle of a circle and looking at the turtle and asking questions. And the biggest thing that we need to start learning how to do is allowing the students to quietly observe and look and think and ask the questions and navigate that to be what is a good question and such. We're not going to rate them as such, but we're just going to help them and then construct explanations. What do you think about that? What do you wonder about? What do you think? How might you investigate it? And then really, how would you know? And so it incorporates all these ideas that our new Minnesota math strands or science strands, sorry, put together. And I love this so much because it is a shift from these facts, but and I like that Molly is from Wetlands, who wrote The Compass to Nature, and they include this piece, and she's going to embellish on this, the sense of wonder. So they have this idea of place and journals and phenology and naturalists, but they really embrace Rachel Carson's work on the sense of wonder, and that it's more important to pave the way for the child to want to know than to put him on a diet of facts he is not ready to assimilate, he or she. And that is, I think, the biggest shift in our Minnesota standards is that don't throw them on a diet of facts, but we as the non-formal educators, the naturalists, even classroom educators, whoever we are, we need to start letting them wonder and learn how to ask a good question, plan an investigation, talk about what they know, maybe be able to sketch or journal what they have observed. And this is what's going to lead us to our next piece. So Molly, I know we wanted to talk about this.
Oh, yeah, opening with the Jamboard. So
Yes.
let's go right to that.
And I'm going to start sharing this in just a second.
Okay, while you're going to that, if I can just dovetail on what your comments were.
Yes, please do.
I think another helpful point is allowing students to ask questions and not answering them anyway, which is kind of contrary to how teachers are trained. Teachers are supposed to have the answers and give the answers. But what I would suggest is with this sort of approach with science and the new standards, don't answer the questions. Let them ask, let them wonder, let them think about it, and then investigate the questions to come up with answers. It creates a tremendous amount of buy-in and motivation for learning for them. So, okay, we're going to the Jamboard. And what we'd like to ask you to do is to, well, can you possibly pop between the two?
Tell me more. Pop between the
Jamboard and
oh yeah. I get what you're telling me now. Can you see the Jamboard or no?
I do. I see it. But I need to see the other one.
Oh, you need to see the other. Gotcha.
Sorry. Okay, so what we want to ask you about is in this middle part, interpretive programs and environmental education lessons. So we'd like you to think about what's the difference between those two. So let's go to the Jamboard again. Sorry, Sue.
No, you're good. You tell me.
Okay, so the way the Jamboard works, in case you haven't used it before, is on the left-hand side, there is a column of like little tool icons. And yeah, that one right there is the sticky note. Want to demonstrate, Sue?
Sure.
So, we'd like you to write on a sticky note, what are some elements or differences, similarities between an environmental ed or an educational lesson and an interpretive program. And it could fall on the right, could fall on the left. You just click and drag it, could fall in the middle. It's anonymous. We don't know who's posting what, so you can say whatever you want. And go ahead, add some sticky notes, provide your 2 cents worth here.
Right, because the big thing is like what we're trying to get at is how does your site, oh, and if you haven't accessed the Jamboard, sorry, I threw it in the chat, the link. So if you click on that, you should be able to get to the Jamboard. Let us know if that's not working. Oh, I'm seeing a few things. But the big part is, oh, I love it, is between the two, is there really a difference between an educational lesson and an interpretive program? Molly and I were discussing this together, and it's like we need to do both as naturalists and non-formal educators. And is there a time and place, how do we shift our thinking? And how do we use this new Minnesota science standards to make a paradigm shift? Because this is no longer about the core disciplinary concepts, the facts, so to speak, but this is more about how do we perform scientific investigation at the very, earliest ages. Oh, I love it.
Oh, good. There's more coming. Yeah. Is there a way? Oh, I know what to do. I can go like this.
Got it?
No, that's not working. Is there a way to make the yellow one on the left larger? If I
I can try.
Okay. Just to be able to read it. I can't read it personally. Okay, thank you. That worked great.
Oh, assessments. Why do we have to talk about assessments? Place-based, Molly.
I love place-based education.
I knew.
Did you put that in there, Sue? Oh, wait.
No, I didn't. I did not.
Mhm. Interesting. It's interesting to see what you're saying and where these things are landing.
Yeah. Because I do think there is a lot of overlap. Yeah, the short-term relationships are so hard.
So Sue, I have a question for clarification. The educational lesson title there on the left side, do we mean formal ed or do we mean environmental ed?
I thought it was environmental ed. Like,
Okay.
let's say I work at Prairie Wetlands, and one group of people coming to see me is a group from a school. And they have third graders that want to learn about what's happening in the fall versus same thing, Prairie Wetlands, and I'm going to do an interpretive hike in the afternoon all about monarchs. I don't know, just because that was brought up and what's happening with the monarchs and what we would be looking for and so on and so forth. So those would be my two ways. How else would you differentiate it?
Oh, how would I differentiate environmental ed versus ed?
Yeah.
Ed? Oh, yeah, I would differentiate educational lessons or formal ed as the formal school classroom setting. And I would call environmental ed, that is sort of a specialized area that, well, in some, like in Wisconsin, pardon me, it's actually part of the, or at least it was at one time, part of the academic standards, just like all the other content areas. So it could be that could be one end of the continuum, and then another could be someone like myself or some of you who work at like Wolf Ridge or a nature center, perhaps providing environmental ed programming or lessons for visiting school groups that come out for a visit. So that I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Does anybody else want to unmute and kind of, I mean, we threw out some of these ideas. It's like, I do feel that as nature centers, environmental learning centers, non-formal educators, we often have two very distinct groups, if not more than that, of learners that we present to. And being aware of audience is really important. So we appreciate where you're throwing a lot of this stuff. It's like, I don't know. We just decided this might be a really good discussion board.
Yep, I agree. It's interesting. I agree with where a lot of the post-its are going, and in some cases I don't agree. And I find it very interesting. And we could almost add a third circle in this, like a three-way Venn diagram, to be educational lesson, interpretive program, and then environmental education. Because I think what I'm seeing mostly on the left side, environment, on the educational part, is more the formal ed kind of thing. So I could be wrong though, because I see the overlap too in the middle. All right, well, should we move on? Do you want to comment anything?
Sure. No, I don't. Pete,
Okay.
John, Joe, anything that you see? Okay. Well, then we'll move on to this other, some of the ideas.
Sure. So some of the ideas that we thought, well, you might have others you want to throw in the chat as well. That would be very welcome. But as far as being non-formal educators and embracing the new science standards, here are some ideas that you might consider that could help guide you in that process for environmental education. One is to focus on the observation of outdoor phenomenon. Phenomenon is part of that word is part of the new science standards. And that is something, like Sue mentioned earlier, we're really good at doing that. We're already good at that. We're familiar with our sites, our places, our biomes, our ecosystems that we work in, and with the phenological progression of natural phenomena that occur there. And non-formal environmental educators are, by the very nature of their work, are naturalists as well. And we have a habit, I think, of modeling positive naturalist behavior for students and teachers through our observation skills, our questioning, data collecting and recording. So, you know, I think that is a real strong point, a real strong connection between the standards, the new standards, and non-formal ed, environmental ed. Another suggestion would be to consider incorporating the use of journals, field journals, nature journals, science notebooks, whatever you would like to call them. There's many synonyms. Students already typically have science notebooks, so this is easy to do also. And there's so many advantages to incorporating nature journaling with science. It's just a perfect place to record those observations of natural phenomenon and record the data that you might collect from them, analyze the data, draw conclusions, sketching. There's many infinite possibilities really of how a field journal can be adapted and used for observing phenomenon.
And Molly, if I might add, I mean, some of the new parts of our Minnesota Science Standards for 2019 that were adopted really goes into this mathematical thinking and the using models. And so that's just basically a good sketch. So whatever we can do as that non-formal educator to launch this idea, this is going to go, you know, it's going to go very far in the classroom if you start modeling with students and teachers what it means to, you know, have a field journal, a nature journal, and how important it is. And it really relies on so many English and language arts standards also about, you know, titles, labels, boxes and bullets. I could go on and on, descriptive language, and so on, besides like the tallying, the numbers, the size, the measurement. So including that field journal, even in your one and done, like they might come out to your nature center once, but if you included that, it might spark the idea to the classroom teacher who came to visit with their students to continue this on in their classroom.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, great points. Thank you for bringing those up, Sue. Another idea is to structure the lessons seasonally as student-driven outdoor investigations. And we'll give you an example of that in a minute.
Yep.
Another is to be the guide on the side. You know, I came from a site prior to working here where really what I did was interpretive programs for an environmental ed audience. So, you know, walking down the trail with a class of students behind me and sort of being more of a tour guide really than an educator. And we need both, obviously, but it's different. So, you know, I'd point out, oh, there's the leopard frog, there's where the killdeer hangs out, there's where the robin is, you know, as we're going, instead of, you know, flip that a little bit around and letting students find those things for themselves, kind of getting out of the way of the front of the line in a sense, and letting them have that ownership and making those discoveries. So guide on the side. And then I have to remind myself all the time, remember to wonder, because I am a science-oriented person. I love exploring and investigating and sometimes collecting data. I love describing. I'm better with really the sketching and the language than the math part personally. And so but I still need to remember to incorporate wonder. Make sure that we take the time to wonder, that it's not all about the data. So let's go to the next, unless you want to add anything or folks.
Nope, that sounds great.
In the chat.
There you go.
Okay.
So I love what Prairie Wetlands is doing with their KWHL. Molly, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, sure. The K stands for, it's something we've borrowed from reading. It's actually a reading strategy that's used in education. So the K stands for know, the W for wonder, the H for how, and the L for learned. If you want more information about it, there's a link there at the bottom. We have a little fact sheet about it on our website that you can check out. They'll give a little more background and detail, but basically this provides a simple framework for framing investigations. And this is the way we frame most of our I can't even call them one and dones, but most of our half day or full day seasonal programs. So for example, tomorrow, third graders are coming and we'll do the third grade bird investigation.
Okay, sorry, but no,
That's
you
okay.
can tell them what they're going to do tomorrow too.
No, this is great. So third grade in the spring, but you could do birds any time of year. They come and investigate birds. The description that you see there is just a little nutshell of what the lesson is about. And so when students arrive and we start indoors briefly with an introduction, our introduction is asking them, what do you already know about birds in the prairie, in the wetlands? What kinds of birds have you been seeing lately? And we make a little list on the whiteboard of what they know, 6 things maybe. And then we ask them, well, while you're here today, we're going to go outside and explore birds. What do you want to find out about the birds out here today? What are you wondering about those birds? So we might generate a list of, 6 questions. And then, so there's your questioning. And then I'll set up a journal page with them that we'll use to collect data when we go outside to explore birds. And I'll show them how to use binoculars, and each student will use a pair of binoculars, and we'll go for a walk. We'll observe birds. We'll record our data as we go. And then we'll come back inside and go back to those original questions under W, under the wonder. And we'll look at our data that we collected in our journals and see which questions we can now answer based on the observations that we made outside.
So Molly, tell me a little bit. So when you said setting up their field journal, does that kind of change class by class because of their wonder questions, or what do you know?
This part is really exciting to me because I can't get bored. I mean, I'm never bored outside anyway. It's never the same exact lesson twice. So I had started saying I was getting ready for tomorrow when third grade is coming out in the next 2 days. So 8 sections of third grade are coming out to investigate not birds, but prairie insects is their fall topic. And so I went back to I had to skip last year, I had to go back to my 2019 field journal and look at what we did to try and prepare for tomorrow. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I worked with 4 classes last time we did this. And I have 4 completely different journal pages that we set up. So, one page is what we always do quadrants. So each quadrant has a different title, and that's just an easy way to set them up to get a variety of data. So one class wanted to know, what are their legs like? What are the names of the insects we'll find? How many will we find? And then I added wonder into it by having a quadrant called surprise. That's where they could record something that surprised them about the insects they observed.
Got it. Because they don't really even know what they're going to see. So I like that quadrant of surprise. That's cool. So
Sure.
you
So,
are setting them up for being super successful out in the field.
well, at least to explore and record what they find. So, the next class that came did, how are they helpful? Sketch, behaviors, and mystery was our wonder word for that one.
Okay.
Sketching is a popular one, kinds is a popular one. We had a couple classes that did behaviors, patterns. One class wanted to know what patterns will we see? And that ties directly into the new standards.
Absolutely. Those cross-cutting concepts.
Yeah, so another wonder word we did was mystery, or excuse me, beauty. So doesn't get boring for me as the instructor. And they have buy-in because it's their questions that we're exploring. We didn't assume that they didn't know anything about insects. We found out what they already know, and we're building on that. So it's very constructivist in approach. We're scaffolding that knowledge, hopefully, and their skills. So yeah, that's the same framework, the same process. It's really a miniature version of a scientific method. If you think,
Absolutely. And I'm hearing that you're helping dial in what questions are most observable because you still only
yes,
have X amount of time with them. And we all, as that non-formal educator, they're coming to our site. We feel kind of like overwhelmed. I have to, vomit all these facts to them all. It's not. It's more about you're kind of focusing their questions, but you're leaving some
yeah.
things like for surprise or mystery or beauty. I loved those words you used.
Well, and those questions were their questions, not mine.
Yes.
So it's really all theirs. And
Student centered, student centered.
it's student centered, and I try very carefully to craft how my word choice, how am I framing that piece about what do you want to find out about. I don't ask, what do you want to find out about insects today? Because then you
Yes.
get questions like, how many insects are there in the world? And that's not a real investigatable question for where we are and the amount of time we have. But I try to ask them, what do you want to find out about the insects out there in the prairie?
So you've narrowed the focus.
Yeah, so we give them a topic, we narrow it to these insects today, and let them listen, then be quiet and listen. Don't don't prompt them too much, listen. And I underestimate, one of the things I've learned through this is I tend to underestimate what kids already know about nature, including very young children. So I have learned to be quiet.
So Molly, I'm going to put you on the spot. We've done this before though. Here are some third grade standards that have to do with structures, variation, and survival. So what people are going to notice, that blue component is that science and engineering practice, that construct an argument or obtain information or construct an explanation. The yellowy gold part is that disciplinary core instruction. Those are the facts, and this has to do with life science. And then in the green are those cross-cutting concepts, and these are cause and effect or systems and systems models. So now Molly, as an educator, she knows she's having this third grade group coming to her. She's going to look at birds. We know the life science standards for birds at third grade are now shifting to this. Molly, what can you say about this, or do you want me to flip to the next slide?
Oh no, just wait. Look at the black ink. That's the benchmarks.
Yep.
So just scan those 3 little paragraphs, everybody, and what words jump out at you that would be relevant to birds? Some investigatable with birds. Go ahead and put it in the chat. Structures. Good one. Thanks, Jessica. Keep it coming.
Or unmute yourself. We're fine.
Yeah, that works too. Obtain food.
Relationships, behaviors.
Calls and other sounds. Oh yeah, I love that. Survival. I lost one there. Camo, coloration. Isn't it rich?
You know, when Molly and I talked before, I couldn't believe that third graders are going to start looking at group behavior. And that's like, wow. But in migration and Minnesota and stuff, group
Right.
behavior is very observable, and we can talk about that.
Oh, yeah. I see a little flock of geese flying by. That's group behavior. Let's go
Yeah.
to the next slide now.
Okay,
I'll
sure,
show
sure.
you the
Because these are some
words.
things that then Molly chose to highlight. Go ahead.
Sure. So concerning birds in spring and
Yeah.
migration is happening, as we know, all across Minnesota. That's universal to all our sites for birds. The red is what I highlighted, strategies animals use to survive. They migrate to survive winter or to reproduce in the summer, spring and summer. Emphasis is on group behavior, again, migration. Cope with changes in seasons brings this on. Animals that live in Minnesota, I love that. That's place-based for us. In the second set, in the middle there, animals have internal and external structures. Birds have feathers, and that's a key adaptation for them for survival, as well as for us to learn how to identify them, colors and markings on their feathers. Their behaviors that they exhibit when they migrate, the different ways birds migrate. What do they do when they're on the ground? What do red-winged blackbird males do when they first show up? They're full of feathers. So models again, I'm gonna skip that. Skin, that's getting to the feathers. The third column, variations in characteristics among individuals of the same species. Yeah, may provide advantages in surviving, finding mates, and reproducing. That's their whole point of coming in for a landing if they're staying here, not continuing on their migration. So examples of cause and effect relationships and animals that have better camouflage coloration. Yeah, so this is just rich for birds as a migration, as a phenomenon that we can all observe outside.
And Molly and I taught this to some people in the spring. And so we had this spring brain on this idea. So there's some things with behaviors and models and skin and maybe their behaviors that they're doing this spring that might be kind of different. Like for instance, a lot of the beautiful breeding plumage has changed in birds, and we can talk about that. But groups are important now because that survival versus groups in the spring, they kind of disperse from that because they're going to make their own family, nest, and they don't want to be in a group anymore. And the models is something I think that we as naturalists are great at. Most of us really love to sketch or write in words or something. Teaching kids how to address this early stages of how to create a model and then later how to use a model is very, very important. And so adding this little component to whatever, group that you have, whether it's a one and done or whether this is a group that you get to see over a course of the year, this is something that is super valuable that we as naturalists can share with teachers and their students. Molly,
Yep, let's go to the next one.
this is our favorite.
Yeah. We're big fans of wonder. So Sue showed you the compass to nature sort of schematic a few slides back. The components include the sense of wonder. And that's so important because none of us, you're not a brain on top of just a brain on top of a body. You have a heart that feels. And the same is true for your students that you work with, whether you're a formal ed teacher or an environmental educator or an interpreter. So, but like I said, that is easy for me to forget anyway. And I have to really intentionally remember to wonder. So here's some possible ways to do that. And if you want to throw in any other suggestions, unmute or throw them in the chat box too. Feel free. Yeah, explore before explaining.
And to me, it's all about this paradigm shift from that whole front loading to letting students, be the answer person. We don't have to be the answer person anymore. We're supporting them. And that is a huge paradigm shift, whether you're working in informal or formal education, and it's going to feel really uncomfortable to begin with. But until we do that, it is that piece that I really feel that the wonder motivates the learning. If I'm just given a whole bunch of facts to digest and memorize, whatever, I could maybe do it if I'm like, wanting to be a pleaser. But if I really want to be authentic learning, it's the what I wonder about and how we incorporate that is going to be rich. So I know we said, we'll talk more about mathematical thinking or the modeling and stuff, but we felt like the most important component we could share about the new science standards is that wonder, asking questions, and letting kids start thinking about how they might investigate how the answers.
I think one of my favorites on here is seeing the world through their fresh eyes when we stop to listen to them. And that's always been a joy in sharing time outside with children. But also that first one, when we allow children to wonder, it creates a motivation for learning. And isn't that what would make any educator or teacher thrilled that students are interested? They want to find out more about the topic at hand. So allowing them to wonder does that.
And Katie Lynn, you made a great point in the chat saying the modeling part makes a huge difference, especially with older kids and adults who have forgotten to let themselves be curious. And that is the hardest thing is to like, I don't know the answer, even though you probably do. I don't know. What do you think? And you'd be so excited for them. Like, that is the coolest idea ever. What do you think? And being able to capture that energy and bring it along so that the kid wants to learn it more. I'm like, I've never seen that, even if you've seen it 10,000 times before. I'm like, what do you think it could be? I don't know. Let's look more closely. That is, it's you would be good at this one, is being a little goofy, right? Yeah. It's just so important. Anybody else have a good, I'm like trying to fly through all this.
I think that the best answer to sometimes what is that is not what it is not what do you think. It's let's go look together or let's go observe together.
Ooh, I like that. Let's go look
Let's
together. Yeah, because if you say, what do you think? And they're like, I think it's a Martian coming from outer space to, I mean, that could be a whole different idea too. So, yeah. And then we really want to build in this idea because we know as nature centers and ELCs and whatnot, is like, how do we promote and try to build in repeat visitation, right, Molly?
Yep.
Right?
That is a question I missed earlier on in our presentation that I meant to ask, but I'll ask it right now. How can I do a raise your hand? Does this?
Yeah, why not? Or throw in the chat, whatever.
Okay. Oh yeah, there's a reactions thing at the bottom. So
Yeah.
let's see what happens. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like in your career, have you ever felt like you have this huge responsibility to teach these students in front of you everything that everything there is to know about the topic at hand in the amount of time that you have them, say 90 minutes.
Or 60.
or 60. You want to just cover everything. Just be honest. I
Oh
better
my
raise
gosh,
my
the
hand.
hands and the thumbs ups are all over. It's overwhelming, isn't it? It makes me hyperventilate.
We have so much natural passion and knowledge about the outdoors, about the environment, that I think that's just not unusual. We want to share it, everything we know and everything we can tell them, and as if they're not going to learn it anywhere else at any other time in life. And yeah, with time and experience, I've learned, well, of course, and becoming a parent, that's not true. They do learn and get exposure in a multitude of ways, not just this one and done visit. So that's why we brought up this point about building in repeat visitation. Feel free to share what might be some advantages to hosting repeat visits. So what I mean by repeat visits is the same children come more often, not just once. They come more than once. So they may come seasonally in a given year. They may come once a month, once a week, every day. Or if you're a classroom teacher and you're not a non-formal ed person, what would be the advantage in this case of taking your same class, your students outside the door of your school, for that matter, on a regular basis of some kind? That would be another way to look at it, depending on who you are. So,
And even just considering, I know at the nature center I worked at, maybe we could only have groups come once a season, but still that was better than only seeing one season, and
right,
and how that enriches and such.
absolutely. One is better than none. So I'm not
Correct.
knock one and dones.
Right.
I remember my 5th grade one and done field trip to the Morton Arboretum in Lisle, Illinois. I still have pictures from it that my family let me take the family little camera and with film in it. Yeah, I'm dating myself. And that was, I still remember everything that a lot about it anyway. So those are very important, but there's also this option of building in repeat visitation. So I saw a couple chats come up. Let me peek. Oh, having to leave, no worries. Family first. So let's see what Beth said. Oh, okay.
You know,
That was referring to the earlier conversation. Thanks, Beth. I missed that. But so here are some ways that we have found to help us build in that repeat visitation. Oh, can you mind to go back 1 second, Sue?
sure, of course.
So some reasons we've come up with that you've probably read all this over right now if you're looking at the slides, but there are advantages to students and to your site. And I think for the site, the biggest one to me is developing that stewardship ethic in a deeper way and developing community support for the site. Because when students come more than once, that just amplifies the conversations at home that happen around that day or that those repeat visits. So now I just wanted to throw that in there if that's okay.
No, I think that's really important. And then the next piece is like, sometimes how do we make that happen? Because maybe I'm working at a nature center that I have a class that comes every fall. They love the apple cidering lesson, you know that one. And so it's like, how do I ever hook in with that group? They've been so, so good at coming every single September, October for that one apple cidering lesson. How would I ever work with them and try to build in repeat visitation, or how to encourage that teacher who obviously likes the outdoors to some extent, or they wouldn't even come to a nature center? How do I build his or her ability to then keep exploring at their own school site? And it's these types of things, because we understand that, it's the scheduling, it's the cost of busing, it's these types of things. And you know, I know several people during COVID came up with the idea, could we have a virtual visit or an office hour? And some people had a flat fee. of that, or maybe it was free if you came twice to our nature center or whatnot, so that there's something in there for that school. And I know that for wetlands, you do this, Molly, with the pre and post ideas that teachers could work with. I know Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge also includes a lot of pre and post activities. Are those things that we as the non-formal educators help, you know, because really honestly, a lot of these formal educators have never taught outside and they're nervous. They need your help.
Yeah, some of the ways that these are just a few ideas. I mean, there's certainly more. And again, feel free to pipe in.
Yes.
We have built our curriculum to be seasonal. So we offer for the visiting half day or full day visits, we offer a seasonal lesson for every grade level, pre-K through 5th grade. And then if they're here that's their first lesson or the half day lesson. And if they're here for the whole day, the second lesson is on nature journaling with a variety of field activities to choose from depending on the season. So that helps when we get to scheduling time, when it comes time for teachers to book in the spring to book for the following school year. We give priority scheduling to those groups that have used that seasonal curriculum, that if they came 3 or more times during the school year, they get access to the calendar first to get the preferred dates for the following school year, for a week at least ahead of anybody else. And then the second week, those that came, I'm waiting for the chat to disappear. Thank you. Those that came fewer than 3 times a week can have access to the calendar. It's through Sign Up Genius, the website. And then on the 3rd week, anybody who didn't book, new groups, then they get access to the calendar. And it really helps because in a variety of ways for our logistics and scheduling, but also for building that repeat visitation, encouraging it. But of course, partnerships, offering some cost sharing for busing through a friends group or another nonprofit, efficient, a sporting association in your local community is usually interested in continuing on the hunting tradition and will pay busing money to get kids outside. So other service clubs as well. So yeah, that's just a few ideas of how to build in the repeat visitation.
Molly, if you're okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can just open
sure.
it up to just dialogue. How are people feeling? What else do you want to know about the standards? Because we really took
Great.
the framework of, looking at what are the big strands and looking at the inquiry process and trying to, think about like our programs. How can we embed some of that asking questions, developing a model, those type of things into our practices that we know we already do, but being more mindful of it. So I'm going to stop share and I'd love to open it up.
And Jan, I like what you said in the chat, and I agree. And I think, and when Sue, you're talking about your Apple program, so if you're going to get a group to go out for an Apple program and then return for something else, in that Apple program, you better be counting, you better be analyzing, you better be sorting by shape, by color, by size, whatever, and incorporating some sort of literacy in there and modeling, predicting of what will come next, so that when they go back to school, they'll start doing that. That teacher might say, hey, I could probably do that at school, so we could go outside to be able to sort, to be able to find, to be able to do shapes and colors of anything that we might find, and still be able to count by 2s and then count by 5s and then count by 10s, so that you've got math and other things, plus predicting what might come next. And so it's kind of that role modeling where you would get people to be able to do that, both coming back to you for more of it and doing it on their own at school.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
my
sorry.
No, I'm done.
I think it's a completely different mind shift for a lot of people, rather than, and many people are used to teaching. I call it silo teaching. This is math time. This is reading time. This is when we do this. Yep. Rather than I can, like exactly what you said, I can go outside and what can we accomplish through that activity or whatever, like exactly what you just said. I've already covered counting by twos. We've already sorted. We've already, and it's much more authentic also for children. But I think it's just harder for some teachers to wrap their head around that. It takes time. It takes a lot more planning. But I think that's part of why more people don't do it.
But Jan, thank you for recommending that, because the more that we can model that we're counting by twos, or we're doing things that are mathematically oriented as well. And I feel like there's a whole nother segue that we can just talk about, showing the math in science. Molly and I, we looked at that too, but we just thought it might get too cluttered in this one presentation. But that's exactly what we need to do. And the same thing with language arts I'm seeing as well is, how are we meeting those language arts standards as well by being outside? Really just the social emotional well-being of being outside. I mean, the pandemic has really done a number on all of us, and especially our youngest learners, and letting them have some space outside to be curious and to wonder and to play is really, really important.
The other thing I've encountered is even if the teacher is willing and excited about it, their administration is not always supportive. So they feel stuck in what they're allowed to do versus what they want to do and what they feel their students would excel at. And that's a barrier that I haven't really been able to help teachers overcome yet. We see in the science and all the research that it's beneficial to be doing all these things outside, and yet the administrations in a lot of districts and schools are lagging behind in some of that. And I'd be interested in hearing what others have, if others have encountered that and how they've helped teachers work through that. Or if you're a teacher, how you've worked through that yourself.
Katie, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is something to really be cognizant of, because it's not always the teachers, it's the admin. And I feel like the weight of the shoulders, like they have to protect everybody, and they don't realize it's okay to be outside. It's okay. And how do we encourage that? Thank you.
It seems to help, I think, to demonstrate in your lesson plans. If you're at a non-formal ed site or you're working with teachers, demonstrate that those, even though you're going outside, those lessons still support the state standards. Learning is still happening. It's not like a recess time. So, there's many teachers who have told me, we can come to your facility because your lesson plans have the standards documented in them. And I can show that to my principal and say, we're going to address XYZ number of standards by going on this field trip. So that would be, I guess, off the top of my head, Katie, if you're not already doing that anyway.
Yeah, and my situation's a little bit unique because I don't have a site where I'm inviting people to come see me. I'm working directly with teachers to encourage them to do more things outside in their schoolyards, whether they have a big green space like Garlow or are a city in a school in Minneapolis that doesn't have quite as much. And so the teachers would be taking, in my situations, the teachers are wanting to take their students just outside their school and aren't always being able to do it. And that's, and it's more that the administration in some of these schools are not seeing that it's just as valuable, if not more valuable, to be doing the same lessons, the same standards, just outside instead of in the classroom. And some of it's, they're worried about liability with like bee stings and falling off of stuff and kids running into the street. And it's just trying to help teachers work through those barriers and becoming more confident in leading their whole classroom outside. Because as you all know, classroom management in the classroom is very different from classroom management outside. Just trying to walk the line between what they feel comfortable with and what they're allowed to do.
Katie, I love this. I'm taking notes and thinking like there could be a presentation at an admin conference at some point about teaching outdoors here in Minnesota. And that it is safe, and these are the prerequisites to make it safe. But I'm making a note of that, and our Teach Outdoors group will definitely chat about it, because it is important, because unless teachers feel supported by their administrators, it is very hard to feel comfortable going outside.
I'm seeing in the chat some suggestions for professional development opportunities, like from the Jeffers Foundation.
Yeah.
Another fantastic way to get maybe some in-service time on how to use the outdoors, outside your door, as a classroom that's just as legitimate as indoors. In fact, it's even safer than indoors in terms of COVID. That's been one of our ways that we can justify opening back up our facility to school groups. We can't have them come inside yet, the day use groups, or residential at all. But we can work with them outside if they're willing to come here and just have one porta potty available, because at least, and we have to mask up, but at least, you know, we can say this is a safe place to be in terms of the pandemic and in terms of COVID. So there's that advantage too.
If you are setting up a professional development through Jeffers, as they shamelessly plugged, incorporate your administrators into that. You get at least 2 administrators to go with your teachers to that. And and this is for the teachers, that's the way to hook in, especially. And you got to get the ones that are going to support it anyways, but then you've got them on your side. At least you can throw a principal or somebody from the district office in with you. That's going to be a lot more in your favor.
Right. And starting small, like conducting your morning meeting outside, or doing your read aloud, or a journaling session outside, and invite those administrators to come and see you and see that, hey, we're getting our same teaching that we would have been in our 4 walls right here in the great outdoors. And don't make it a big thing, because you know that's another big stressor, but just do something very, very common that you always do inside, and just do it outside, and maybe even within 10, 12 feet of the front door, you know, just start small.
If you do a Jeffers workshop, you get free journals. So there's another good reason to sign up. And you can contact David just as easily as you can contact me. So, but we're happy to talk to anybody. So David, what are you doing next week?
You have to unmute yourself,
All right.
dear.
Am I on?
Yeah, you're on. You're next week anyway, so give us a plug.
Sure. So next week we'll continue to build on this and what John and Pete had started a couple weeks ago, and we'll aim to get you active as scientists with 3 investigations, observations with earth science and life science, and the participate in 1 outdoor data collection investigation. And if you don't have the ability to get outside, we'll let you get involved in an online field study. I'm not sure if that's a thing, but next week it'll become a thing during this time. And then
David, you said it was going to be, I'm sorry, David, you said it was going to be 3D. So are you going to try to combine those 3 dimensions?
Yes. So with the activities, then we'll hopefully we'll take some breaks and realize and notice, you know, how outdoor observations and investigations are just a natural fit with 3D teaching, and possibly hook on to some of the things you've been doing. So if you're able to attend, it's for formal and non-formal or informal educators. Just bring a journal, and we'll also share some more of the Jeffers resources as well. That's it.
Sounds great. So folks, thanks so much for joining us again this week for Teach Outdoors Minnesota. It is 5:07, so we've gone a little bit over our time, but we'll stay on until 5:30ish unless nobody else is here for office hours. We're going to try to start a half hour before and a half hour after our formal presentation, for just that, dialogue and questions and whatnot. And we just love to see more of you.
Thank you, Katie.